Hi everyone, I'm Mike. This is the Sunday Art Show, and this week we're on the south coast of Cornwall on an incredibly windy and stormy day, overlooking the huge beach which is Whitsand Bay, and then off in the distance that little outcrop of coast is known as Rame Head. And that's the scene I'm going to be painting today. In watercolour, I'm going to try and capture the stormy conditions and the kind of subdued lighting which occurs in these weather conditions. So conventionally I tend to paint scenes and animals in strong light, so strong cast shadows, clear areas of highlight, clear areas of dark shadow. But today there aren't really any sort of specular reflections, there's no clear direction of the light. It's all very diffuse and very scattered and subdued in both colour and light and shadow. And so I'm going to see if I can do that with the watercolour. And what I'm doing here, just starting out, is keeping things very loose to capture this scene. You can see the horizon is barely visible. But on a brighter day, there's actually a little chapel, ancient chapel, out on the top of that headland. And I only need to depict that as a little silhouette. But I'm switching between my big mop brush and my smaller round. So I'm using the small brush to make sure I get the outline of the coast that I've put in with pencil already. Make sure I get that pretty accurate. But then with the big brush, when I'm tackling larger areas, I can, put the paint on a little more freely. And although it's kind of a grey day and there aren't any bright colours, I want there to be some colour within my painting and within the greys and the browns and the subdued tones that I create. So I'm kind of doing a lot of my mixing of colour on the paper, as you can see, wet in wet, letting the watercolour paint do its own thing, lifting off little touches of paint here and there. Now the foreground I need to make considerably darker, so this foreground cliff edge needs to be darker and stronger than the distant landscape to help create a sense of depth. So I've started off with what is predominantly some neutral tint here, but not too strong a mix. But I don't want it to be purely monochrome, so that's why I'm coming in with kind of that reddish brown, back in with the neutral tint, a little bit of purple, and again letting things mix. But you can see I've changed the way I'm applying the paint. The brush strokes are much more clearly defined, and while there is wet in wet mixing, it's not as incredibly loose as the background is. A little bit of dry brush here, a few little fine details with a rigger brush, and then I looked at the water and I thought, I haven't created the depth of tone that I need really. So I decided to take a different approach with both the water and the sky. So when we work with watercolour in the conventional way, this is just inside the cafe where we were sheltering from the storm. You can see there's Rame Head off in the distance. You can see the straps blowing in the wind and the gulls flying around. It really was crazy windy. Yes, but conventional watercolour, we tried to maintain a little bit of transparency, and that gives you a lot of luminosity. So that's really good for capturing a sunny day. But as mentioned before, it's really subdued colours here. It really is just not much to kind of get hold of. So I need to kind of kill that luminosity that I had with the first few washes. So having let everything dry, you can see I'm coming back in with a second layer of watercolour, letting that do its own thing. And what I hope is that the underlying wash I put down first will show through the second wash, and the drying mark I've got in the sky above the little chapel, that's fine. The drip marks I've got in the ocean, that's fine as well. So this is kind of a different style of watercolour where it's less about transparency and more about building up layers of tone and colour. And texture, almost more importantly than anything else really. I would say tone is always going to be most important. Value gives you the sense of depth and the sense of light and form. But after that, for this particular painting, the colours I feel aren't going to be quite as important as the texture. Now I just wanted to share a little tip with you, if you're any fellow artists out there. If you go onto pixels.com and get an account there, this is where I upload most of my work. Well, because you can add keywords to each of your images, you can use the search bar like I'm doing now to look up cloud art, or I just looked up rain art. And it's a really neat way. If you've got a lot of images like I have, I'm working towards my 1000th upload, so it's difficult to remember every single painting that I've done. But it's a really neat way to just kind of look up, say, the word storm in your portfolio, and then select paintings which are in keeping with that theme. So at the moment, I'm painting a stormy day. It's a cloudy day. It's an overcast day. So I can put stormy in, I can put overcast into the search bar and find all these different images. And there are going to be lots of different subjects and styles and things. And that's going to allow me to kind of compile, because a lot of the things which will come up in the search I won't want to have in the sort of a little stormy, overcast, cloudy, weather-beaten painting collection. But I'll come back to that later. It's just a really neat way to access a big portfolio and pull out key elements. Anyway, back to the painting of the day. I let the watercolour dry completely, and now I'm coming in with some titanium white interactive acrylic to just very loosely and very simply pick out the big shapes of the white water kind of washing in on the sea. So a little bit of dry brush used there and just some very thin lines of white. But on the foreground, what I just did and what I'm still doing is coming in with some dry brush, and I'm using the watercolour paint, almost straight out of the tube. Just a touch of water, a little mix, so that it runs a little bit. But the dry brush mark effects that you get when you put the paint on almost completely undiluted is really good for creating texture within foliage and long grass and stuff. And you can see I'm adding a little bit of the pure titanium white acrylic on top here and there, just to add a few highlights there as well. So removing the tape from the edges gives us a better sense of how the finished painting is going to look and helps to kind of automatically frame the painting. So here's the first kind of little collection I selected, kind of 3 impressionistic sheep under a unsettled colourful sky. Then we've got a belted Galloway under a rainy sky up on Dartmoor. This was inspired by the view out of my front window on a very rainy day, as was this, and I think the sky in this one works particularly well. These are all acrylic, by the way, mostly interactive acrylic. But the texture in the rainy sky there. There's a close-up of the belted Galloways in the distance from the previous painting. You can see the animal's almost translucent, as if it's going to move away. Here's an Impressionist Style landscape focusing on the sky and horizon. This was also inspired by Dartmoor, a little pony and foal, the foal sheltering. And here's another Devon stormy landscape. So by using the search bar on pixels, I can really quickly pull out paintings which I think are in keeping in terms of their feel and subject matter with the painting I'm doing currently. So here are some close-ups of the painting of the week, Rame Head down in Cornwall. There's the finished pick. Hope you really enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.